Hi everyone, we're going to continue on here talking about some of our different species interactions and some of those relationships. So last time we talked about predation and parasitism. Today we're going to start with mutualism. So mutualism is many species depending on another species for survival. So in some cases, the organism can't survive alone. Those are more extreme cases, but again, this is just showing how dependent on each other that these species are, usually in a mutualistic relationship. So mutual is a relationship between two species in which both species are benefiting. So a really great example here is going to be the bacteria that you would find in our own intestines. So the bacteria are helping us. We're benefiting from the relationship because they are breaking down food that we can't digest. And in return, we're giving that bacteria a home and food for them to eat as well. So again, you can see that give and give relationship that's happening here. Another relationship that we might be able to use as an example here would be, say, cows and birds. So sometimes birds you'll see looks like they're pecking at cows, but what they're really doing is taking bugs and taking ticks and fleas off of these cows. So in that case, the birds are benefiting because they are getting food. And in the cow's sake, it's benefiting because it's getting rid of all of those different parasites that might be on the cow as well. So again, that mutual relationship is really going to be both species benefiting, a positive relationship for both. The next one we're going to talk about is commensalism. So commensalism is the relationship between two organisms where one organism is benefiting and the other one is completely unaffected. So this one might sound a little bit weird, but a good example here is between sharks and a fish called remoras. So remoras attach themselves to the sharks, and when the sharks feed, some of those scraps will come out into the water, and that's what the remoras are going to use as their food. So you can see that the remoras are really benefiting from this relationship. They're getting the food that they need, and sharks in this case really aren't having any effect. The fish attaching to them doesn't hurt them in any way. It doesn't slow them down in their journey. So they're really unaffected completely. Another really good example would be birds laying or putting nests in different trees or in bushes. There's no harm to the tree, so they're unaffected completely, but the bird is getting a home for its young in themselves. So that's another good example of this commensalism relationship. So even a seemingly harmless activity could have a really big effect on another species. So like that bird just putting some sticks in a tree, it's creating that nest, it's creating that home for itself and for its young, but the tree really isn't affected at all. Same thing with these sharks and the remoras. So let's go over one more time the relationship between organisms with all the different interactions that we've talked about. So competition, remember, competition between food, space, time, any of that. We're going to see that both species in this case are going to have a negative impact. And that's because, again, if we're using the fox and the coyote example, they're both trying to get the same food resource. So sometimes there might not be enough food for both. So it's going to negatively benefit both of those animals. Predation is our next one. Remember our predator-prey relationships. Our predator, in this case, is going to have a positive interaction because it's getting the food that it needs. And the prey, our species 2, is going to have a negative interaction because they are being eaten. So again, that's a very clear positive-negative relationship. Parasitism, very similar. Our parasites are feeding off of our host. So the host is our parasite is obviously going to have a positive interaction, where our host is going to have a negative interaction, being harmed by being eaten by that parasite or getting a disease from that parasite. That's another clear positive-negative interaction. And then we have mutualism. Mutualism, we remember talking about how both species in this case are going to have positive reactions. the bacteria in our stomach, digesting food for us, and then also having a home and a food for themselves. And then finally, our last relationship here is commensalism, where one organism is benefiting, like the remoras or the birds in our case, and one is not affected at all, like the sharks or the trees or the bushes. So again, this chart is going to be pretty important when we're talking about what those interactions mean and where they come from. I also would like to encourage you to watch this video. It gives us a nice deeper look into all those different types of relationships just one more time. The next thing we are going to talk about is symbiosis and coevolution. So symbiosis is a relationship in which two organisms live in close association with each other. So pretty much all of the different species interactions that we took a look at could be considered a symbiotic relationship. Usually those symbiotic relationships are described in which one species is benefiting. So in the case of the ones that we talked about here, the ones that are really going to be considered symbiotic relationships would be predation or parasitism, commensalism, and mutualism. But again, all of those animals do live in some sort of a close association, so this is why we would consider that symbiosis. And then over time, we might see some coevolution happening. So let's talk about what that coevolution means. So over time, species with close relationships may co-evolve. So this is going to include adaptations that either reduce harm or improve the benefit of the relationship. So an example would be our mouse lab that we did. The mice who lived on the lava flow over time co-evolved to have that dark fur. And the reason for that is because it reduced the harm of that animal. So they were less likely to be seen by their predators, so they were able to survive longer, able to reduce the harm of that relationship. Where the white mice couldn't evolve fast enough, they were getting eaten off, and we saw those differences on that lava flow. Last thing we will be talking about today is what a keystone species is. So this is going to be a species that has a strong and or wide-reaching effects on a community. So if we take a look at our image here, our sea otter is going to be our keystone species in this aquatic habitat. So sea otters eat sea urchins. And the reason why that is so important is because sea urchins will overgraze and overeat the kelp in this community. And this kelp can be really important because it is our photosynthetic area, our photosynthetic product here. So when the sea urchin is overgrazing, we're going to see loss of habitat, loss of food, and all of these different things in that community. So the removal of the keystone species significantly alters the structure of that community. So we can see here where the sea otter is absent, the sea urchins have completely taken over, overgrazed that kelp, and the sea urchin population has really just taken over and killed this community. So the sea otter is really, really important because it regulates the population of that sea urchin. And again, if you do want some more clarification on this, this is a really great video to help explain why those keystone species are so important. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll see you next time.